So, I was working on the next long form video for the channel, which should hopefully be done sooner rather than later, when I got sidetracked looking through my followed games on Steam and realized that the Bookwalker had come out, and I had to play it. It was a game I got really interested in after playing the short demo released about a year ago. And since then, I've been occasionally following its development from afar, interested in what the demo had promised. And now that it had been released to the public, I figured why not procrastinate some more and go down this short detour. These are my first impressions of the Bookwalker, Thieves of Tales. For anyone out of the know, Bookwalker is part point and click, part apartment simulator created by the fine people of Do My Best Games, who also made a game called The Final Station. Looked interesting, so I figured I may play it on my own someday and picked it up with the Bookwalker in a bundle. And it's published by TinyBuild, publisher of literally every indie game ever made. One of these surely rings a bell or two.
But enough talk.
Let's actually tear into the core of this game. Here's the premise. You're a writer named Etienne, or at least I think that's how you pronounce it,
Etienne.
who's been put into writer's jail by the writer police for 30 years, meaning he is unable to create any literary works until he serves his sentence. However, he is offered a way to work off his sentence by stealing artifacts from books and delivering them in this really high-tech suitcase. He does this by literally jumping into each book from the real world, turning into this page-faced creature when immersed in literature. From there, the story is enjoyable to watch unfold, both the overarching story and the extended vignettes each book has in store. There is some enjoyable banter and drama, especially with this little companion fellow found in a prison cell in the first book named Roderick. Throughout the game, his way of thinking about the characters of other works clash with our protagonist, and both viewpoints are consistently challenged. Etienne, for example, believes early on that the characters in other authors' books are expendable due to their perceived lack of depth and originality, especially compared to his own work, while Roderick believes that all characters share equal weight and must be protected rather than mindlessly harmed or used. There is more to it than that, but I implore you to play the game for yourselves in order to see how their dynamic develops and is ultimately explored throughout the whole game. Now, this isn't a traditional analyze everything video that I usually do with the Ode 2 series, because much like Gloomwood at the time, the game's still new, and I wanted to give people a chance to play it for themselves rather than just spoil it rotten. Because despite its short length, clocking in at around 6 hours, this game is completely worth it for the story and character drama, alongside the pretty solid point-and-click gameplay. And it's only $15, so why not support the dev team for their hard work? You don't even have to play it if you don't want to, just throw it in with the rest of your 1000 game Steam collection and call it a day. Put it on your growing backlog of titles that you promise you'll check out, while actually neglecting to get anything done to the exhaustion loop you've unfortunately put yourself in by buying an overwhelming amount of Steam games due to your lack of self-control. As I said earlier, the game's part apartment simulator, part point-and-click adventure. Let's look at the first part first. You have a myriad of options when it comes to interacting with the apartment. You can annoy your friendly neighbors, answer the phone that rings every 10 seconds, break through police tape and trespass on a crime scene on the first floor, or steal from the communal fridge. Truly, the possibilities are endless. Make sure to pick up that suitcase you happen to find on the ground outside your apartment and read this letter about how you're going to legitimately work off your sentence. This game is immensely relatable to me because it accurately depicts what having writer's block actually feels like. One aspect that specifically correlates with myself, tirelessly working on these dumbass videos, is the amount of time it takes to write them, although 30 years may be undershooting it. But with the power of determination, ink bottles, and a trusty dose of Adderall, we can once again get the creative juices flowing. This journey of self-fulfillment starts, however, with some good old plagiarism, which begins at the first book, A Drop of Infinity. Wait, are literary works put in quotes or italics? The world may never know. That's right, we have to steal some immortality potion from this poor guy's book. Should be simple enough, really. All we have to do is hop in and experience a wordier version of the Doctor Who intro. Now that you've successfully transported yourself into the top-down dungeon, we need a path forward. Pointing and or clicking doesn't seem to be doing the job at the moment, so it's time to go back into the real world and obtain a lockpick from our astute burglary collection. See, we can bring things from the real world into the book, and the opposite is true for the artifacts we are attempting to steal. But as you'll see later, Not everything can be transferred successfully. Sometimes the legal consequences are too heavy to handle. Back to the first book, which acts as a tutorial for the gameplay present within the other 6 books. Click on stuff to scavenge around, talk to people for clues, make choices that ultimately don't matter. Yeah, the choice system may seem like a missed opportunity to some. What seems pretty robust and replayable in the beginning is all revealed to be window dressing on subsequent playthroughs. Not that I completed the game twice as of the time I wrote this part of the script, but going back briefly and seeing how the decision system ultimately railroaded you into one path was kinda disappointing. It wasn't super unexpected, but the illusion of choice can make the game boring when replayed so close to a first playthrough, which is why I'm going to reserve another go around for later on. Still, accepting that the choices don't matter except for skipping some fights or different dialogue, which honestly isn't great because one of the achievements involves experiencing every fight in the game, it's not a hard pill to swallow, as the linear structure works for the game's pacing and storytelling. It would honestly be a mess to deal with a whole host of branching storylines, so I'm thankful that there aren't any overall. It's just the false pretenses that I was a bit annoyed at. You want to know what else I'm annoyed at? Combat. Like, okay, it works fine enough for what it is, but there's so little meat to chew on with it, it's honestly pretty disappointing. I had no high hopes for the combat, and my expectations were still not met in some regards. Things I like about combat: it's simple, which works for the game. You have a regular attack, an ink drain move, a shield move, and a stun. These attacks may require ink in order to be used, or generate ink outright. Ink can be fully restored with these ink bottles found by exploring and crafting them. You get upgrades for these attacks at certain points in the story, being able to choose between 2 for each move. Another thing, it's responsive, and by God, it can be satisfying to link moves together at times. But the fights range wildly in difficulty. Despite this, the fights aren't hard, which is a real feat when the balancing is this off the mark. I never actually died during the game, even in the last area, which supposedly houses some of the harder encounters. However, this was pretty much because one of the upgrades you get later on kinda breaks the shield move, healing you every time you use it with no ink cost whatsoever. Besides this exploit, the combat is a cakewalk, which wouldn't be so bad if the enemies were varied, but they pretty much have the same attacks and very little variation, other than their health. And like, some of them have a heal move, which is more annoying than interesting. But the worst part is how rare combat actually is. At most, when it comes to the normal game, you may have like 5 fights per book. Keep in mind, this number is quite large compared to the average. Mainly, there will be like 1 fight at the start of an area, 1 or 2 near the middle that may or may not be able to be skipped entirely, maybe another one that's more hidden off the beaten path, and a boss at the end of each book. That's it. Some books only have like 2 fights, which just shows how much of an afterthought combat is. One more unrelated criticism I have with the game is the exploration. Not all of it, mind you, but there were numerous cases later on in the game where I found that it wasn't really worth exploring certain areas. The game has a crafting system that doesn't feel wholly necessary for a linear story-driven game, but it doesn't take away from the core systems and is overall fine. But sometimes, the crafting system bottlenecks the exploration, and the linearity can limit what is off the beaten path. For instance, there's a secret in one of the stories, a level I enjoyed overall, that required you to simply get a painting from one of the students of the wizard school and place it on this wall. Simple. Took a couple minutes of running around to get the appropriate pieces put into place, and for my reward, we get a chest filled with these coins. I know what you may think. Cool, a currency of sorts. Maybe we can spend it somewhere and buy something valuable that may help us later. Well, in actuality, it's considered a junk item, an item that's only useful in being melted down for this ink resource, which is only able to be spent by crafting ink potions, which ties back to the combat system being too easy. I was already swimming in ink with the drain move, now I have so many unused ink bottles by the end of each book, it's absurd. So in short, there are times when the exploration can exasperate my problems with the combat system due to it often trying to tie into it with unceremonious results. Okay, those are my criticisms of the game. Now let's get to what the game gets right a lot. Namely, the storytelling, characters, and world building. Now, of course, a game called The Bookwalker gets an A+ for the writing. That's just as likely as EA getting voted worst company in America, with Blizzard handily running up the second place. But just because it makes sense, doesn't mean it's an unwarranted accolade. Pretty much all of the characters in the Bookwalker are likable in some capacity, and even if they aren't, they serve their position well within the story and are interesting to watch, whether it be in one of the 6 vignettes or outside in the real world. The never ending phone calls with your handler have a great amount of personality attached to them, and because of that, the world feels alive despite you not really getting out much. The world outside the apartment is built up in smart, diegetic ways without you actually seeing it, which could be seen as a parallel to how books are based on creating images in the reader's mind. That's probably stretching the subtext pretty thin, but nonetheless, the individual books you dive into are real page turners. In the second book, you have to steal Thor's hammer from an industrialized, robot infested power plant filled with inexplicable benches and disheveled machinery laced with crafting parts. The creativity of Do My Best knows no bounds, especially with the environment design and the art style as a whole. The game is incredibly pretty, sometimes sidestepping into a wonderfully picturesque territory at times. Backgrounds are surprisingly detailed, character designs look great, animations are generally smooth as butter. There's this unparalleled sense of scale that many landmarks bring to the environments that house them. Despite many of the whimsical settings, these places still appear lived in and natural in order to preserve the suspension of disbelief. The quests for each of the individual artifacts are extremely memorable and unpredictable. Let's go back to the first book. In order to actually retrieve the immortality potion, you first have to break out of this jail cell with the aforementioned lockpicks from earlier, then attempt to grab the key from the hot metal grate, stumble from the heat and accidentally drop it down below, loot this comically large skeleton, loot a few more rooms, travel back to the real world, annoy the hell out of your neighbor and ask to borrow his sledgehammer, bring it back into the book so you can smash this wall, find the key again, drop it down another grate, fight some spiders, find this guy with a sack on his head and ask him what beer he drinks, eventually find the key for real this time, fight more spiders, attempt to make acid in order to dissolve this metal door, hear gunshots, run in the direction of said gunshots, steal a car, crash into the alchemist, let him die out, and retrieve the potion. All in a day's work, I suppose. Now that was the first book of 6 in total, not counting the actual ending itself. There is far too much to cram into this first impressions video, so I'll just conclude the video with my final thoughts. The Bookwalker is a great little game that won't take up too much of your precious time. It's a concise, enthralling, and at times a bit philosophical.
Look at that face.
It won't win any awards, but that isn't a bad thing. Not every game can be the next 1,000-hour open-world sandbox made by some gigantic AAA studio. Some games can just be a refreshingly original tale about a book thief who goes on some wacky misadventures. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, peace!